The morning fog always blankets this tech park like a heavy shroud, masking the corporate greed humming beneath the surface. At 60 years old, I have learned that true power never needs to shout. I was inspecting the manicured grounds of my commercial property when a matte black sports car roared into the plaza and parked directly across two reserved spaces, including my personal stall. A young man stepped out of the vehicle, radiating an unbearable wave of unearned confidence and corporate arrogance. This was Barrett, the recently appointed director of operations for the artificial intelligence startup that leased the upper levels of my building. He glanced at my rugged work clothes and heavy key ring, completely failing to recognize the woman who actually owned the concrete beneath his expensive loafers. Without making eye contact, Barrett demanded that I park his vehicle immediately while warning me not to damage the expensive rims. He casually threw his heavy key fob toward me with a dismissive gesture that spoke volumes about his character. I did not move a single muscle, allowing the keys to crash onto the pavement and skid into a muddy puddle near the landscaping. Barrett exploded in anger, shouting that the machine cost $200,000 while demanding that I retrieve the keys. I calmly informed him that he was parked in a designated tow zone, refusing to back down from his intense glare. He threatened to have the management company terminate my employment by noon, completely unaware that my late husband Thomas and I built this entire empire from nothing. After he stormed inside, I retreated to my private fourth-floor office to review the original lease agreement. The startup, known as Nexus Tech, was originally managed by a respectful financial officer named Gideon who understood commercial contracts. However, a recent massive influx of venture capital funding had pushed Gideon out, replacing corporate integrity with entitled growth hackers who treated my beautiful property like a playground. Later that morning, I observed Barrett causing a massive scene at the ground floor cafe because the kitchen was temporarily out of alternative milk. He berated the young barista Maya, threatening to contact building management over minor service issues. When I attempted to intervene with a practical suggestion, he laughed in my face and declared that everyone who did not write software code was completely useless to society. A stressed junior employee pulled me aside after Barrett left, revealing that the arrogant executive was actively planning a complete takeover of the campus. He intended to convince the board to destroy the serene courtyard that my late husband planted with his own hands years ago. That dynamic space was meant for quiet reflection, and the thought of it being paved over filled me with a cold determination. The true battle began 2 days later when the loud roar of unauthorized jackhammers shattered the morning peace at 7 o'clock. Barrett had hired an outside crew to dig up the guest parking lot without obtaining permits or landlord authorization. They were drilling directly into a crucial retaining wall that contained the primary fiber optic communications grid for the neighboring medical research facility. I ordered the construction crew to halt immediately, pointing out the severe danger to the live clinical trials next door. Barrett simply sneered, stating that he required private charging stations for the executive fleet and did not care about medical researchers. He claimed that his company paid the majority of the rent, which basically made him the true landlord of the entire office complex. That evening, I attended the monthly corporate mixer wearing a formal blazer to gather more intelligence on my problematic tenant. I overheard Barrett boasting to a group of investors that the actual landlord was an absentee boomer living in Florida who never checked the property. He openly admitted that he had never even read the lease agreement, proving that his massive ego would be his ultimate downfall. I immediately contacted my trusted compliance officer Lydia, an expert inspector who lived to catch code violations. Together, we quietly documented the illegal activities over the next few days, building an undeniable legal dossier against the company. We discovered secret subletting operations involving cryptocurrency equipment in a supply closet, blocked fire exits, and multiple severe safety violations that threatened the entire complex. The perfect opportunity for the final trap arrived on Friday afternoon during a high-profile international investor walkthrough. Barrett was guiding a group of wealthy foreign financiers through the plaza, falsely claiming that his company completely controlled the parking structures and common areas. He saw me standing nearby with gardening tools and loudly ordered me to clean the walkway, telling his guests that I looked like a vagrant. Instead of reacting to the public humiliation, I walked away and dialed Hank, the owner of a heavy-duty towing company. I authorized the immediate removal and impoundment of the black sports car for repeated parking violations and property damage. As the investors watched from the glass lobby, the massive flatbed truck dragged the screaming vehicle away, leaving Barrett completely frozen in shock against the glass window. My legal counsel Silas had already prepared a formal notice of default based on the extensive property damage. Section 14 of our strict lease agreement explicitly allowed the landlord to seize personal property as collateral for unpermitted structural alterations. Barrett had caused over $60,000 in damage to the electrical grid, making his luxury vehicle the perfect legal leverage to protect my financial interests. I bypassed the local branch entirely and forwarded the massive dossier of safety violations directly to the parent conglomerate in New York. The executive board members were absolutely horrified by the immense liability exposure and immediately scheduled an emergency leadership audit. The corporate leaders requested my presence at the meeting, realization finally dawning on them that their star director was an absolute loose cannon. On Wednesday morning, I entered the executive conference room wearing a tailored corporate suit instead of my usual utility jacket. Barrett sat at the head of the table, desperately trying to explain away the massive financial discrepancies to the general counsel, Victoria Sterling. When he saw me enter, he loudly demanded that security remove the cleaning lady from a private corporate meeting. Victoria Sterling silenced him immediately, introducing me as the actual owner of the entire commercial campus and their primary creditor. I calmly presented the documented evidence of fraud, fire hazards, and the unauthorized construction that had placed their entire lease in default. Barrett watched in utter horror as his corporate empire collapsed in a matter of minutes, his face draining of all color and confidence. The board terminated Barrett effective immediately, ordering him to surrender his security badge and corporate devices before being escorted out by my guards. He carried a pathetic cardboard box down the main steps, completely stranded without his precious vehicle or his title. I watched him walk toward the public sidewalk, a powerless man who finally learned that respect is far more valuable than temporary authority. The parent company promptly wired $65,000 to cover the extensive property damages, which I immediately transferred to the campus garden fund. I returned to the ground floor cafe and ordered a fresh drink from Maya, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of my beautiful property once again. True power does not need a luxury vehicle or a loud voice. It simply requires the patience to let arrogance defeat itself.